So a dietitian is a person who has the right university qualifications in the evidence surrounding food and nutrition, and they apply that to counselling groups and individuals about healthy eating, both simply for health but also to manage certain medical conditions. Hi, I'm Jane Bowen and I'm a research dietitian at csiro. Working out what to research and what to study can be difficult because research funding is pretty tight. So what we do is look at where the biggest areas of needs are in Australia and work out what we can do to address that and solve that problem. We know that what people eat has a huge bearing on their health, and we're beginning to work out that that is, way more complex than we ever realised because it affects our health and also the bugs in our gut. The other thing that's changing in terms of we are what we eat is that the information is really being brought to the people through accessing info through the web, famous Dr. Google. So people are more in control of deciding about their health and what they eat than ever before. We work in a really big team at csiro conducting our human clinical trials, and we bring together people with different research skills and different scientific skills, and they come from behavioural science, nutritional and dietetic science, and then all the laboratory and analytical science. But we also have people with expertise in maths and statistics as well, and increasingly we've got people involved in all the e-health and digital side of science. We use maths in pretty much every stage along the pathway for doing a scientific study. So we use it to calculate how many people need to be involved in a study so we can get the right answer, and then randomising people to different groups, and then of course designing the type of intervention, so calculating people's energy requirements, and then of course all the statistical analysis at the end of a study to manage all the data and interpret that.
In a clinical trial, the time that we spend with volunteers is usually around about half an hour for their first visit, and then for their subsequent visits can be anything from 15 minutes to half an hour, sometimes even faster. It just depends on what we need in the trial. So down here in the clinic, when participants come in for a trial, the information that we'd be looking at, figuring out how they would fit into the trial, are things like their height and their weight, their body mass index and their activity levels. And from that we can calculate what their energy requirements are, so we can work out how much food or meal replacements to provide them with. I do use maths a lot in my daily job. Some examples of what I would have learned through primary school or secondary school are basics like addition and subtraction, through to things like algebra when we're calculating energy requirements for a person or calculating what their dietary intake of food needs to be, through to more advanced formulas that we might use to work out someone's requirements for protein or carbohydrates.
The majority of the samples that we get up here are blood samples that have been taken from the volunteers by the nurses in the clinic. So the blood goes into a machine called a centrifuge, which spins it and separates it into two layers, which we then take off one of those layers and store until the end of the study. Then we analyse it. So when we analyse samples using a plate-based assay, we have standards, which are liquids that have a known concentration. This is set up on a graph, which gives us an equation that we must then use to work out the concentration of, say, insulin in the sample we're investigating. We use maths every day in the lab. It's very important to us. Without maths, we wouldn't be able to work out the concentrations of the various analytes in our samples. Maths has proved very helpful in my role in terms of analysing our data. Often we run samples in duplicate to make sure that we're getting the correct response or correct answer, and I need to be able to use maths to look at the two results that I get and make sure that they are close together. That shows that the answer is accurate.
So we have a statistician working here, and she'll often present us with tables and graphs. So I definitely need to know how to interpret a range of graphs like scatter plots or box plots. Important to be able to interpret tables as well, and understanding fractions and percentages, through to some of the more advanced statistics that we do like regressions or t-tests as well. So really understanding what she's trying to communicate to us and how she would have come to that answer.
When a trial participant comes into the clinic, they'll get various measurements made on them, some of them being like physical things like height, weight, blood pressure, etc. As well, they'll get some bloods taken. When that data eventually comes to me, I will then look at that data. I might do some histograms, say, of blood pressure of the two treatment groups, so the placebo, the people who are not getting any active treatment, and the treatment group, and compare those, because you hope that you will get a nice balanced trial so that there's the people with a higher blood pressure are not all in one group and the lower blood pressure in another. After all the data is collected, we would then look at the data and we'd try and analyse that data. Usually the main outcome is whether there's statistically significant differences between the treatment and the placebo group. Well, it's surprising in your adult life how much you use mathematical skills. I mean, in my particular profession, obviously maths is involved in almost all my day. The mathematical skills that I need to program, to actually analyse my data, even the mathematical way of thinking, so that when I'm designing these trials, I can be thinking about, well, what sort of things might impact the results of this trial? What would help us ensure that this trial will be able to be not argued against later?
Here now, I can absolutely see that the maths that I did at school and the way I started thinking about maths and answering questions is used absolutely every day in my work here at CSIRO.